Hello and welcome to From the BLN, the Burnley podcast. This is the preview podcast for Burnley versus Sunderland, which is happening tonight as you're listening to this, hopefully. This providing you with a bit of pre-match preview ahead of that clash with the Black Cats. Slightly depleted pod squad. No Woody this week, but we've got Chris Boden, Justin Connolly and Simon Evans. I'm Andrew Greaves. And chaps, a good test of Burnley's form, really, isn't it? We come off the back of a 3-1 win after extra time against Reading. Lots of positives, as we discussed in the debrief podcast. But Simon, the Black Cats, early kind of front runners in the Championship, faded perhaps slightly predictably, but still hanging around. You'd still expect Sunderland to be in that kind of top six race, wouldn't you? And a real kind of chance for us to see where we're at this kind of halfway stage of the season.
Yeah, no, it's a good one, isn't it? It's one of those fixtures that you can understand why Sky pulled that one out and said we'll have some of that, because it's two big historic clubs, and it's good to see Sunderland. I know that they're rivals in our promotion race this season, but after everything they've been through over the last decade, it is good to see Sunderland back. You know, do they belong in the Premier League? Perhaps that's going too much, but they certainly belong to be in there with the likes of us and Sheffield United and Leeds, in that sort of yo-yo zone, battling it out. So it will be a good test. I'm going to be interested to see, whether anything that happened at Reading influences his team selection for Friday night, or if that is treated completely isolated game and we're back to what there was before. So that's what I'm going to be looking out for.
Yeah, and Justin, I think Scott Parker's spoken this week specifically about Lyle Foster on the left-hand side and him perhaps providing a bit of an option there. Somebody asked me what my team for tomorrow would be, and I do have Foster out on the left. You know, it's been a bit of a kind of awkward position, hasn't it? We've played Hannibal there a little bit. Koleosho's not quite hit the heights, or him and Anthony have been switching and it's not quite worked. Do you expect kind of any of those performances at Reading to have forced Parker's hand when it comes to the game against Sunderland, or are you expecting kind of return to what we saw, in the previous league games?
You do hope that it will influence it in some way. Otherwise, what's the point of doing it? What's the point of trying these players in different positions? I think in his press conference, as you say, Scott Parker has sort of said he does see Foster able to do a job out there on that left hand side, and obviously Hannibal was the player who dropped into there when we started to look a little bit better, but he's still banned, isn't he, for this game, so he won't be available. So I kind of think, from what Scott Parker was saying in his press conference, I would be surprised if Foster doesn't make it out onto that left hand side. He did say as well in the press conference that over the last couple of weeks, Foster's really come up to speed compared to where he was before, and that maybe sort of explains why he's not got straight back into the side, as we probably all would have expected him to be playing up front, thinking that Fleming was a makeshift number 9. But again, what Parker was saying in the press conference was that he sees him as a player well capable of leading that line and getting better at it. So yeah, I think if Foster's going to start the game, he's going to start on the left hand side, and I'd sort of be surprised if he didn't, to be honest.
Yeah. And Chris, the form of Zian Fleming, I think it's, 5 goals in his last 8 games, albeit 2 coming off the bench against Reading at the weekend. It kind of gives Scott Parker and us really more options than we perhaps had when, Fleming wasn't quite up to speed. We know Fleming came in. We mentioned this on Monday, in Monday's episode. He came in, he didn't really have a pre-season because he had that niggle. Do you think we're finally seeing the kind of the Zian Fleming that we were expecting to see. It's just taken us quite a while. Obviously, Foster not coming back into the side straight away has allowed him to build up that fitness. Do you think it's the case that it's perhaps the first time we're going to see a couple of these players really fully match fit and firing on all cylinders, and that that should be a bit of an exciting prospect, shouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you want these players to get significant game time under their belts, don't you? And then you can sort of judge where they are. Fleming's had sort of bits and pieces, hasn't he? But he's starting to get a sort of settled run. Goals are goals. Strikers. If you turn around and people talk about sort of Rashford's failings at Manchester United. He got 30 goals one season. I mean, I think how many of those were in the various cup competitions, Europa League, but he still got 30 goals. So you can't knock it. You can't, and it's all if you're in good nick, and he has been Zian Fleming, and you had another couple in the cups. It just adds to that confidence, doesn't it? But actually, I think if you look at like Foster, if I remember right, he played sort of left side against Sheffield United in that big game at Turf Moor a couple of years ago when it was just an argument on who was going to win the title, basically. And we had a bit of fortune with the goalkeeper getting sent off, and Goodmanson got a couple of goals. But Foster, what he will give you, he does work hard against the ball as well. And I think that was the worry for me going to Blackburn, that without Hannibal, you got Sarmiento, who, he for what he offers you when he has the ball at his feet, he gives me kittens against the ball. And I thought that might be an issue against Blackburn. As it turned out, it was absolutely fine. But I think Foster, in that sense, can Foster give you as much attacking threat as Sarmiento? Yes, he can do. He's good, and he's direct running from that position. He's arguably better suited for that left hand side as well. So, as I say, for what it gives you, both with and against the ball, I'd be tempted to put him in there. And he also gives you that can come and join Fleming as well, and they can almost. You can be fluid in that area, can't you? Foster can go beyond Fleming, and Fleming can go beyond Foster. And so the only sort of downside, I say, you're hoping to get Brownhill into those areas as well, and you're hoping it's not too sort of congested. But that's maybe the better solution, that you can get Foster there on that left hand side, and you still can get Brownhill off Fleming, if you will. So I think it's quite a nice little solution on paper, that.
Yeah, and Simon, I mean, we've talked a lot about Brownhill and the need to really have him in that 10 position, because he's a lot less effective when he's further back, alongside Cullen. With Foster's kind of instinct as a striker, you'd expect that he's not going to drop into that number 10 role, perhaps in the same way as a Hannibal naturally kind of guides himself in there and it gets a bit crowded. I mean, Chris described it as direct running. We, of course, know it, affectionately as straight line running. He's pretty good when he's picking the ball up with his back to the opposition, turning and then driving from areas, isn't he? I mean, we saw it. What was it, Luton away, when he set up Vitinho for one of the goals? I think was it the goal against Spurs or Chelsea for Odegaard last season when he kind of picked it up and cut it, basically ran in from the right on that occasion. But we've always kind of because of perhaps the way he was deployed under Vincent Kompany, kind of not laughed off the thought of Foster as almost a wide forward, but it looks like Scott Parker's got him a little bit more controlled and a little bit more focused in terms of, if that's the position he's asking Lyle to play, he's got that discipline, hasn't he, a little bit more than he perhaps had under Vincent Kompany.
Yeah, I think if you look at Foster's performances during his time with the club, he's actually been more effective in that role, I think. He doesn't. I think he likes that degree of freedom, and I think he needs a bit like some fullbacks who are like very good at overlapping when they can get running 25, 30 yards, but maybe aren't that quick over like 4 or 5 yards. He seems a lot more effective when he has some space to go into, whether that be cutting in. He's not a winger, is he? But, you know, maybe this actually is his natural position because, you know, he hasn't looked particularly effective as a big number 9. And maybe he's just been typecast that way a little bit because, you know, he's a big fella. I mean, it happens. You know, you get players whose strengths are actually, you know, it's an inside left position, isn't it, really, rather than a winger, you know, that old term from the sort of 1960s, if you like. So, yeah, I mean, I think also, like Chris mentioned in working back, I mean, there's been some games we've seen, you know, last season where he's been really good at taking us up the field away from home, you know, where he can pick up a ball, you know, and Koleosho's done that from time to time as well. But you know, he can pick up the ball, Foster, and take you 30, 40 yards up the field. And he's not shrugged off the ball easily, is he? You know, he's got that physical presence as well, which can work as well out wide. I mean, if we're thinking about, you know, Burnley players who've had some of those sorts of qualities in wide positions, you'd probably have to go back to Steve Kindon, really, for a sort of physical winger who had that power and strength. So, yeah, I like him. It's funny, though, last week I was at an MLS event and I was talking to a guy who's an analyst and a coach about a player who I really like in MLS. And I said, like, you know, he's a good old-fashioned winger. He's really fast, and he goes, yeah, he says, it's a bit of a straight line runner, though. And I thought, this does actually exist in the real world amongst real football experts. So, but no, I'd definitely be giving Lyle a shout out a start. I think probably the only one from last weekend who would go straight in, even though we singled out 4 or 5 players. Although, you know, the right back area, you know, you wonder about as well.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the right back, Sonny, with you, Justin. I mean, really impressive debut. I mean, it's not like he's coming in and he's not got any pedigree. I mean, you know, I think he scored the winner in the Danish Cup final. Clearly well thought of in his own land, as Simon, you know, alluded to or mentioned on Monday. You know, full Peruvian international, so playing in that kind of, you know, fairly tough confederational qualifying kind of system, if you will. Would you be tempted? I mean, you know, I think people know my views on Connor Roberts. I can't get on with him. But he's a great player, you know what I mean? There's just something about him that I can't click with, but he's a great player and he's been playing well. Is that probably the biggest decision for Scott Parker, whether to kind of sacrifice Roberts for his new toy, or do you expect Sonny to kind of sit and have a watching brief for the first few games?
Well, I mean, when you've kept so many clean sheets and you know, not conceded many goals, I don't see the case for changing that backline at all. I think you stick with it, particularly against one of the stronger sides in the division. I mean, Sonny looked class, didn't he? He looked like he might be a bit more effective going forward. So maybe we've got a mirror image of what we've got on the left, where we've got Bashir, who's a bit more of a defensive player, although he's improving going forward. And then Lucas Perez, who might play against the weaker sides and give us a bit more of a threat going forward. We've almost got that on the right-hand side there, although I've not seen enough of Sonny to really, you know, be sure that comparison is going to turn out to be apt. But I just think you can't change. You know, the back 4 is the back 4 now, and shy of injury, I wouldn't want to be tinkering with that because it's been so successful, hasn't it?
Yeah. And Joe Worrell, Chris, has been doing some press this week. I noticed that The Guardian had done a piece today about, you know, Burnley looking at records for not conceding, and the Port Vale team from many years ago. And, you know, he was very fulsome in his praise for CJ Egan Riley and Esteve, and he was making the point that, you know, against Blackburn, they must have hundreds of games worth of experience. And you've got 2 lads here who've played not very much over, well, Esteve, not much over 50 professional games. And CJ Egan Riley, who's only really been a pro for 2 years. And him and John Egan, who would get into quite a lot of championship sides as a first choice centre-half pairing, before we even get on to Ekdal and Delquar and having Bear on the treatment table. It's quite amazing, isn't it, that, you know, as Justin said, the sheer amount of clean sheets we've got, you're not even tempted to tinker with those 2 centre-halves despite their, you know, perceived lack of experience.
No. It's all about sort of partnerships and understanding, and is it if you've got a sort of settled pair with the record they have and the way they complement each other, and yeah. It's about opportunity, isn't it? We've spoken about Egan Riley. See, you go back to having to sell Charlie Austin on the eve of the season, and it's up to Ingsy and Sam Vokes. This is your opportunity now. You either take it or you don't, and they took it. And Egan Riley, who we thought was nowhere near, the first team picture. Really, it's just, I say, he's the find of the season. Probably the find of the championship, if we're telling the truth. But I say Worrell, he's a top professional. He says he's not kicking the door down, throwing the toys out the pram, etc. He knows the drill. He's had a bit of that bad fortune. He'd actually done well himself, in situations. He come in against. He was one of the players who came in against Blackburn and didn't win the game at home at the end of August, but he didn't look troubled during the game, and competent, passing the ball out from the back, organizer, a leader, might nick you something at the other end, sort of thing. But I like what he was saying. It's not even about this season. It's about beyond. He was sort of saying if we do achieve our goal and get promotion, that's not the end of it, is it? You want to try and sort of establish yourself at Premier League level, and he's been there and done that with Forest. So no, I like the attitude. The squad, as we've spoken about often, just seems very very down to earth, very just very settled. Very they've got their heads screwed on, no ego, and all power to Worrell. But you say sometimes you bring these players in, and it's not like he sort of put a rocket up Egan Riley's backside because he wasn't in the picture before Worrell arrived. But sometimes you might sign a player and they might not have, the biggest influence on the pitch through no fault of their own. And hopefully Worrell gets his chance to impress. But no, it's the pictures. It's just magnificent, isn't it? At the minute defensively, it's. I don't think we quite grasp how remarkable it is. To concede a goal every 3 games or something like that, it's ludicrous. We've seen some good defensive units in our time. When we qualified for Europe, the defensive record was ridiculous. I think Steve Cottrell's first season, I think they conceded around a goal a game or something like that, and the problem was they only scored a goal a game. But it's on target to be just a defensive season we'll never forget, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things Worrell mentioned, and Chris touched on it there, Simon, is no prima donnas, no egos. One thing that I've noticed whenever Scott Parker is talking about his players, he did it again, the club website has there's more to come from Zian Fleming, which is obviously taken from his press conference. He's really keen to stress that, no matter how good Egan Riley is, no matter how good Esteve is, no matter how good Zian Fleming is, he sees lots of room for improvement. We kind of get this impression that Parker really enjoys that developmental side of the coaching. And he's clearly very good at it. I mean, he's taken a side which was devoid of confidence, devoid of, not quite ability, but devoid of ideas from last season, and moulded them into this unit, which is, as Chris said, conceding roughly 1 goal every 3 games, never conceding more than a single goal per game in any of the games that we've had this season, league games at least. Do you think that is part of that key to success, the fact that, a manager likes to keep these players grounded and say, look, yeah, you know what, we're second in the league, you're firing 5 goals in 8, brilliant. We know how good you are, but there's still masses that you can improve if you want to become a real top level player.
Yeah, and he's been there at the top level, hasn't he? So he knows what's required, and he can see who's got potential and who hasn't. And there's some players we've got this season who are playing really important roles in the teams who are not really going to get much better at this stage of their career, are we? I don't think just Josh Cullen is going to be transformed over the next 3 or 4 years. He is what he is. Brownhill the same to a degree. But you look around the team, it is quite a young side, And if you how good could Egan Riley be? he's right to raise that question. He's improved so much in the space of 12 months. What's he going to be like in 2 years' time? If he carries on this progression. Same with Fleming, who could become an absolutely fantastic player. I mean, you can see there's still some sort of raw edges around him but the talent he's got and the ability he's got, and to put the ball in the back of the net, but also the movement he has, the spaces he gets into, and so on. So there is a lot to be optimistic. It's quite nice having a side like this where, that was one of the unfortunate things about that whole mess that Company got the club into, was that we signed a lot of talented young players and never gave them really a chance to develop, because dropping them straight into Premier League matches where we were struggling, it's just not the way you develop young players, is it? And, it is easier to do it in the Championship. So we'll see if we're saying the same thing about Scott Parker, after the next window and what we sign if we go up and so on. But it's good. I mean, there is a touch of the sort of Southgates about Parker in a way, isn't there? He does seem to like that side of things, the developing, the learning, the building the squad. But what you're saying about, no prima donnas and so on, that is a lot of that, I think, is down to the way they've built this team spirit. And it helps when you're winning, but it hasn't all been smooth flowing, has it? We've had setbacks, we've had disappointing spells. Poor performances, even when we've won, but they've come together as a unit, and that was absolutely not guaranteed at all when we had that craziness at the end of August. So what he's done really to this point is I think an outstanding job really of developing young players, building a side, and creating a team spirit while getting results and doing the job as well. And he's done it without any shouting or screaming or any nonsense. And so, hats off to him at this stage.
Yeah, and Parker himself has been reflecting on his own development this week. I think we've spoken before about him spending time with New England boss Thomas Tuchel when I think Tuchel was at Bayern Munich, and Parker was having that spell out of the game after leaving his coaching role in Belgium. I think one of the criticisms, and I think some of us at least shared that kind of fear that Scott Parker never changes. Scott Parker will do exactly the same as he did at Bournemouth, which didn't work out, do exactly the same as he did at Fulham, what didn't work out. There was always something about it. But there's a quote this week from him that says, it was an opportunity for me to jump off the treadmill. After that, once you get a little bit of energy and you then get the bug back, I spent some good time with some good people. And it was probably a good time for me just to reflect a little bit where I've gone wrong, what I need to change, how I can improve certain bits about myself or my coaching, or how I can change things. And they were invaluable really for me. I mean, he himself is going on a bit of a journey, isn't he? I think probably after the last two jobs at Bruges and at Bournemouth, he's almost a bit of a busted flush at that point. I mean, there was no real links to any other jobs. We were surprised that he was at the front running for the job here. Everything that I've heard is that he was the outstanding candidate when it came to, his philosophy and why he was doing things differently. I mean, it's quite good to see a manager, and this is not a dig at, our former manager, Mr. Company, who's doing, great guns in Germany, but it's good to see a manager with a bit of self-awareness that actually, you know what, I'd made lots of mistakes. I'm not sure we'll ever see Company say he made lots of mistakes last year because of the success that he's having now. But that self-reflection, I think we don't see enough from managers, do we?
No, we don't. I mean, I think that's part of the deal, isn't it? These days you've got to have a philosophy, you've got to have a way of playing, you've got to have a way of and they always say, don't they, company. This is like a sort of consequence of Pep's sort of influence on the game. I think it's kind of, we never change. We just carry on doing what we set out to do. If you compromise in some way or change things, then it's an admission that you've got it wrong in the first place. And Company was never any good at that kind of, sort of self-reflection or self-criticism. It was always, things have gone wrong, but we just move on and carry on. We come into work tomorrow and just keep doing the same things and keep working hard. So, you know, I've listened to Scott Parker quite a lot, and he does talk a lot about progress. He does talk a lot about improvement, and that's what we want. That's what we wanted after last season, wasn't it? We wanted the situation to change, for things to get better, to improve, and that never seemed to happen last season. We just kept saying the same things over and over and over again. And to see somebody, you know, like you say, saying, you know, we can improve, we can get better, we can move things in the right direction. You know, it is really refreshing, and I think they were reflecting a little bit on that sort of that chaotic transfer window in the press conference again today, because obviously we're playing Sunderland, which is the game that we lost. On the back of that sort of chaos, we didn't know. You know, that was the game that sort of where everything went wrong, wasn't it? Where it just seemed like the whole thing was falling apart. And I think it's interesting that we've moved on from that moment. He didn't really want to talk about it, Scott Parker. He was like, well, you know, that's happened. We did it. I get the impression that he used that sort of experience to galvanise the squad after that, and that has led a little bit to this sort of cohesion that we've got now. It's like the Blackburn game. We saw them all celebrating after the Blackburn game. Experiencing the highs like that and the lows of the Sunderland game together, it brings people together, doesn't it? They've got that shared experience now, and they know that they can come back from mishaps, and they know they can come back from adverse situations. So, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. And I think we're seeing that now. And you know, tonight's game is a chance for us to sort of right that wrong, isn't it? Which gives it a little bit of more of an edge. I know it's an important game anyway, but putting that ghost really to bed it will be useful, I think, for the players who went through that period, and the manager as well.
Yeah, one thing I was just going to say really quickly on Parker, and like, you're quite right that a lot of people thought he was washed up after the Fulham and Bournemouth experiences. But there's so much nonsense talked about managers and the careers and the way that they're judged. You know, if you look at the great managers of the past and look at their biography, go on the Wikipedia and look what their first 2 or 3 clubs were like before they hit that period, which is usually only a period of like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, the Fergusons and so on are like the big exceptions, aren't they? But if you look at them, most of them have failures and setbacks and things that don't work out from them, because they're starting off in a new career. They've got their coaching badges after they're playing. They're starting off in a new career, you know, and one that you're judged very, very quickly and very, very harshly on. So I just think, you know, we should remember this when next time we have a vacancy at Turf Moor and people start talking about managers and instantly dismissing people, because just because it's not worked out at one club doesn't mean it's not going to work out somewhere else. They're completely different environments. And you'd never take that attitude to anyone in any other business. Oh, he flopped at Rank Xerox. There's no way we can have him working for Coca-Cola. You know, it doesn't work like that. And if you look at Rooney, for example, who's been now widely dismissed as an absolute failure. Well, look at the situation he was in at Plymouth with effectively a League One side, you know, and an ownership who kept wanting to bring in more young players when he probably needed a few experienced heads in that side to keep their heads above water. So there's so many things. I think Parker's proving to be a really, really inspired choice.
It depends what happens next year, though, doesn't it? Yeah. Depends what happens if we do go up, because that's where he's kind of had his failures in the past, isn't it? Not in the Championship. He knows this league inside out, and he can get teams promoted. But what happens next year? I think that's where it's important for him to learn from his mistakes. If he really has done that, then he's the ideal man for the job, because he has failed to be a success in the Premier League. If he knows where he's gone wrong doing that, then we might be set for a better season next season than we had last.
It does go both ways, doesn't it? He's talking about sort of managers being judged, and by the same token, you do get Flavour of the Month getting jobs ahead of, you know, people who probably, you know, should be getting jobs in situations a lot of the times. You know, people ride on these, off the top of my head, like people like Ryan Lowe and Schumacher at Plymouth and things like that. And, didn't pull any trees up at Preston, and Schumacher lasted 2 minutes at Stoke. And, you look at, Owen Coyle was flavour of the month, wasn't he, for a while? And, he's...
He was linked with Arsenal and Liverpool, wasn't he, when he was at Burnley?
Exactly. It's just, it's who's hot and who's not at those moments in time, really. But Parker, to be fair to him, without having read overly much into, the situation, at Bournemouth, and it was a bit of everyone who saw his interview after the hammering at Anfield was sort of like, oh, he's talked himself out of a job there, hasn't he? It was basically, to the powers that be at Bournemouth saying, well, what do you expect? You haven't given me the tools to do the job, sort of thing. So you can't really judge his Premier League stint at Bournemouth, because he was there for 2 minutes in the Premier League. He got the job done. He got him promoted at the second attempt. He couldn't do it the first time, which is the opportune time to strike, and he got them up. It's tough to. You got to judge Parker when he's. People will say the side he had at Fulham probably shouldn't have gone down, and I think that's fair comment when you look at the players and what they've since gone on and achieved. The Lookmans and people like that. It's let's get there first and see what sort of animal he is at that level.
Yeah, definitely. I think that flavour of the month comment is right. I think, I'd probably put Gareth Ainsworth into that as well. He kind of clearly has a good media persona and certain managers, but again, Simon, are you kind of surprised? I mean, we all thought that after Vincent Kompany, and, I was guilty of kind of falling into the trap of wanting the second most beautiful girl in town to become manager after the most beautiful girl in town had got themselves a sunbull and jumped in a taxi down the bottom of St. James's Street to Munich. God, I forgot where he'd gone then. But do you think there's almost a maturity within the club hierarchy? We believe that Alan Pace was kept on the periphery. And again, I'm not using this as a stick to beat Alan Pace with, but we kind of put the decision in the hands of a committee, we believe, of Matt Williams and Lee Mooney, kind of people who were not going to be blinded by the star quality of a Ruud van Nistelrooy, who, let's be honest, is not doing great things at Leicester, not be kind of bowled over by a Frank Lampard because they've seen him on TV and, they know who his wife is. Do you think that there's a bit of it was a bit of an unsexy appointment following Vincent Kompany, but it was what we needed as a football club, a little bit of pragmatism in terms of, here's a guy who spent the last 2 seasons in this division getting promotion?
Yeah, it was. Whether that was the case or not, it has the hallmarks of a decision that was made by people who understand English football, and I think we could have been in real trouble. I mean, if that transfer window had have happened with someone like Van Nistelrooy, they might have walked. We even wondered, some of us, whether Parker might walk, but I think some managers who, if they've come in the sort of more sort of celebrity appointed manager, it was a mature decision, a sensible decision. I hope that's an indication of how things are going for the club for the future, that that is sensible ownership and management, to give the right decisions and delegate it to people who know what they're doing in that area. And we've seen a few indications that might be the way things have gone now. It'd be nice to ask them if that's been a conscious decision. But you see Chris Casper coming into the academy. That's a sensible decision. As opposed to somebody who maybe had a flashy PowerPoint presentation. So it's not suggesting Chris didn't. I'm sure he's got excellent PowerPointing skills. But I think it all bodes well. The big difficulty is going to be that if it goes really well this season, that gap we've got to go up, and the decisions that have to be made then about the transfer market and the players and so on, they're just enormous, and they can swallow it up. And we can say that Parker hasn't done that well in the Premier League, and the results speak for themselves. but it's an incredibly difficult task as well, isn't it? I mean, if keeping these sorts of clubs up is not an easy task at all for any manager anywhere in the world. It's really probably one of the most difficult tasks you could have in football management. It's arguably a lot easier to get out of the Championship than it is to stay in the Premier League, isn't it?
100%, yeah.
Unless you spend 400 million or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the thing, isn't it? That is.
How much did we spend last time? How much did we spend last time? About a lot. Record amount.
120, whatever it was.
Yeah. More than we've ever done.
But if you remember when we were there, well, not established, because like I say, you never establish a club like Burnley size at that level. But to be there for sort of 7 out of 8 years, you always talk about you've got to beat the teams in and around you. And now you look at the teams who you'd expect to be in and around you, and they're not in and around you, because Bournemouth are pushing for Europe, and Brighton are pushing for Europe, and Nottingham Forest
second or third.
Pushing for a bloody title. The relegation race is, well, you're looking at, 3 from 5? The 3 that came up, plus Everton, who've been down in the doldrums for a good few years now. Wolves, who aren't the magnificent side that came up under Nuno and looked like, I think we all thought they're going to take Burnley 7th place, and they did, but they've never really kicked on from that, and they've lost a lot of those magnificent footballers, and they've replaced them with not so magnificent footballers, and they might just stay up because there's 3 teams worse than them, but if we are to be promoted, let's say, who are the sort of whipping boys in and around you anymore? Fulham look like they're almost as they were in the early noughties, where they look to me again like they're going to stick around in the Premier League for the foreseeable. So, it's
Everton have become one of those clubs, really, haven't they? Yeah. Everton have become like Palace were, just one of them clubs eternally hanging around the bottom end, but not quite going down.
A Coventry or a Southampton until it eventually.
Just a malaise, isn't there? There's like a malaise at clubs like that. I mean, just looking at the Premier League table, as you say, the clubs that you need to be in and around you nowadays are Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United. I mean, probably all safe on 23 points and upwards from United above Everton, 6th and bottom. But I mean, looking at the.
We'll get 6 points each off Leeds and Sheffield United, though, won't we? So there's 12 there.
It's 12. We're not going to break Derby's record, but it is. I mean,
it should be Southampton's record, won't it? Soon.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's looking that way. Just looking at the kind of transfers, we won't perhaps talk about transfers because there's not much happening. We've had a couple of outgoings and not very much on the inside, apart from Morgan Whittaker being linked and things like that. I mean, the policy does appear to be. And again, I might be completely wide of the mark, guided a little bit by Scott Parker. I can't imagine, the analysts are suddenly picking out this striker called Ashley Barnes in deepest, darkest Norfolk. I imagine that's a Scott Parker look. We need a bit of experience to get us over the line. Simon, have we abandoned, or not abandoned, but partially abandoned this crazy money ball? I mean, Sonny obviously, does feel like one of those players you buy cheap, sell big. But do you think that pragmatism that we called for a lot last year is again a bit more in play this season, because we've got a manager who is perhaps happy to have it as a collaborative process as opposed to company who we know wanted to control, pretty much everything he could within the club?
Possibly. I mean, to be honest, my working assumption on the Ashley Barnes thing was that was an Alan Pace deal. In fact, I think in Ashley Barnes' interview, correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody remembers it differently, but I'm fairly sure he said when he was saying, the usual question, how did this come about? When did you first hear about it? And he's like, I spoke to Alan and then I spoke to the gaffer. It was in that order, as he described it. So I wondered if at the time, was this a little bit of a populist move, if you like, from Pace? Let's bring Ashley Barnes back. We can cover that wage for half a year and keep the fans happy. And I'm not against it. In fact, some of us were suggesting that. Fine. But I'm not sure how the transfer thing works. I mean, I would imagine that there's still that school of recruitment people. You would think that Sonny is someone who's come through that sort of analysis of data and then some scouting, hopefully, as well. So I don't know. I don't know how that's working, but you would hope that there's going to be less mistakes this time around and less of an obsession about, flipping players. Because it was ridiculous, as we've gone through on multiple times, to think you can do that while fighting a battle against relegation in the Premier League. Everyone wants to find young players and sell them. There's nothing at all radical or new thinking about it whatsoever. I know ALK have made a big song about that's their model. It's everybody's model. Everyone wants to unearth young talent, apart from the big clubs who buy it at the end of the process,
you only have to look at Michael Keane. We pick him up for a couple of mil, sell him for 25. Andre Gray, sign him for, whatever it was. The old fun and games we used to have about his transfer fee. That they got 18 million quid for him. Ingsy, they would have got a lot more. I mean, it was a tribunal record at the time, but they should have got a lot more for him. Trips's was a contractual thing, but they got a lot more for Trips and so on and so forth. It's it's what you do. I mean, what did they turn down for Tarky before he saw his contract out? They could have made a 30-40 million pound footballer out of Tarky. It's not rocket science, is it?
We weren't very good at selling in that era, were we?
We weren't very good
at just go
laying down players to contracts, were we? That was the problem. We allowed. This is the worry about Egan Riley, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago. It's that kind of, unless you tie players down to longer term contracts, they're going to walk for free or not very much. I mean, it'll be a tribunal deal again, I guess, for CJ Egan Riley. Perhaps I'm not quite sure what the rules are.
He's under 24. It'd be a tribunal,
But I mean, I think you're right, Si. I think the Ashley Barnes transfer was probably cooked up in the Linton Travel Tavern or whatever, somewhere down in that part of the world when Pace went down to see Alan Partridge do one of his leadership and man management courses that Partridge used to do down at the Travel Tavern. But and Sonny does feel, from what Scott Parker said, in terms of the club have been interested in for a while. It just feel like we've almost got a bit of a mix of, everything's on the table. Look, Scott Parker said we're going to be reactive. Let's leave Sunderland there. We've got a bit of a new feature that we're probably only going to last. We're probably going to get lawyers' letters, so it's probably only going to last this one episode. But we've got our own Barry Norman, Barry Borden. Watched Bank of Dave 2, so you don't have to. Obviously, Banker Dave 1, hugely successful. Rory Kinnear playing Dave Fishwick, former Stand sponsor, and now minor investor. I think he mentioned in the interview that he knew Alan Pace and he had a minority stake in Burnley. So there we are. We can tick him off the list of who's got money in Burnley Football Club. The second instalment, The Lone Ranger, Banker Dave 2, currently number 2 in the Netflix charts. Chris, you've sat through it, I think, haven't you? What do you make of it? We've got Def Leppard rescuing Dave from gangsters in Miami, I think. So the story seems like it's gone a bit more far-fetched than last time.
Brooklyn gangsters. Brooklyn gangsters. No, you can't. I say you can't do. I mean, what Dave Fishwick's done is brilliant for the man on the street, isn't it? And his success is ridiculous. But the first film was passable, wasn't it? It was all right, and it's like I say, the impact.
It wasn't until Def Leppard were playing Turf Moor.
I mean, like I say, I don't know why you need to embellish a story like that. I think the review I read about the second, it said it's almost like you listen to a lad at school who, what did you do this weekend? I fought this dragon, and I beat the dragon, and it's just. It almost feels like that, the second one, that they felt the need to just sort of embellish this story. And it's, from another review I read, if you're going to do anything this weekend and you want to watch something to do with Dave Fishwick, watch his documentary instead that's about half the running time and doesn't have the nonsense at the end of that. Yeah, it's not good at all. But it's, to be fair, you've had a world premiere in Burnley Town Centre, and look at the calibre of actor they've got, and it's every credit to them, and to get a sequel as well is remarkable. I don't want to be seen to be doing it down, but it's not a good watch at all.
A little bit far-fetched, fantasy land. I agree with you. I think Dave Fitchwick's good for Burnley. I think he's, on the banking stuff that he's done is absolutely superb. But I did enjoy the documentary, I have to say, when he was driving around in a kind of soft-top car with a soft-top down, eating a banana, telling everyone he was Dave from Burnley. That was quite endearing. But there you go. It is available now on Netflix. I don't think we're going to have Netflix sponsoring the next episode of From the BOLN, but there you go. If you do, wherever you're going to watch today's game, I know it's on Sky and it's broadcast live around the world. I think it's going to be a really good advert for Championship football. Real ding-dong battle between the Clarets and the Black Cats. Enjoy the game wherever you're watching it. We'll be back on Monday with a debrief, as usual, sticking to our New Year's resolution and giving you 2 episodes per week. Don't forget to follow us, BOL Podcast, on the various social media channels. If you've got any questions for us as a panel, we will kind of start to integrate some of those questions. We really enjoy seeing your comments and questions. Do keep them coming. But until we see you again on Monday, until you hear from us on Monday, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the game tonight, and up the Clarets.